My name is Kilian Alopo. I am VP for Japan and Korea at Kerlink, and today I will be talking about some popular LoRaWAN-based use cases on the Japanese market. Before we start the presentation, I would like to thank the LoRa Alliance for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Thank you very much. And I'm going to start this presentation with a quick refresher about Kerlink and about what we do. We are a French company founded in 2004, headquartered in France. We have been working in the IoT business for more than 18 years, providing IoT connectivity hardware, software, and services. But really, our core business is the design, manufacturing, and commercialization of highly robust and resilient LoRaWAN gateways. This is really our core business, and this is where Kerlink's expertise shines worldwide. And on top of that, assuming the customer is using our LoRaWAN gateways, we can also provide network maintenance services and sometimes network operation on behalf services. And finally, we are very proud to say that we are a founding member and a board member of the LoRa Alliance since 2015. So, with LoRaWAN, you can cover many different use cases. And at Kerlink, the verticals that we address with our customers and partners can be classified in three main categories. The first one is smart city and quality of life. This can refer to use cases like smart parking or urban operations digitalization. The second one is smart building and industry. So with this one, we usually refer to use cases such as optimization of the building occupancy or predictive maintenance for factories. And the last one is smart agriculture and environment. So this one encompasses use cases like smart farming, cattle monitoring, as well as pest control, for example. So, before we jump into the list of use cases on the Japanese market, I think it's essential to understand what are the key drivers for LoRaWAN adoption in Japan. And this is why we need to take a step back and focus on a bit of context about Japan. So, Japan is one of the most populated countries in the world. And this population is heavily concentrated in cities along the coastline. The reason being that 75% of the country's terrain is mountainous, therefore not habitable and not suitable for agriculture. Japan has the eighth largest exclusive economic zone in the world, and it shares maritime borders with China and Russia in particular, and also with other countries. One key fact that we know about Japan is that it's substantially prone to natural disasters, earthquakes, tsunami, volcanic eruptions, as well as seasonal typhoons. And it also has a tremendously big manufacturing industry, ranking third worldwide in total manufacturing output, just behind China and the US. So the country is famous for manufactured exports, including vehicles, of course, but not only, also electronics and computer parts and chemicals. So please keep this in mind because this will be useful for the rest of the presentation. Japan is a country of factories. It also has a very long and dense railway network with one of the best, if not the best, railroad quality infrastructure quality, in the world. And the train is the main transportation for a majority of Japanese people. Finally, Japan is a very logistics-intensive country. This is linked, of course, to its big manufacturing economy, but also to its consumer market. Japan has the fourth largest e-commerce market in the world, and as such, you can see top players that include the likes of Amazon, Rakuten, and Mercari. Now, I'm giving you those facts not randomly. You will see they are all connected in some ways to the use cases I am going to show you later. Now, what are the main challenges that the country is facing right now? Well, the first and the most critical one is the demographic crisis. The Japan population is rapidly shrinking and aging. And this is causing huge labor shortages in all industries and in companies of all sizes, both in the manufacturing sector and non-manufacturing sector. So to remain competitive, the Japanese factories are in dire need of digitalization and connectivity solutions. Also, the topology of the geography of the country makes that you have a significant number of rural areas, remote areas that are without cellular coverage or where LTE coverage is very scarce. In addition to that, all those natural disasters hitting the country are causing landslides and floods. And Japanese government and the local administrations are scratching their heads right now, trying to respond efficiently and quickly to those threats. Another of those threats is that in remote villages and cities close to the mountains and the forests, wild animals are causing a lot of damages. In particular, bears, boars, deer, and sometimes monkeys need to be monitored, and they need to be monitored to protect the crops and the local agriculture. We also see quite an impact of global warming on seasonal climate in Japan, as well as on seawater temperatures. And this is causing a lot of problems. I'll come back to that later. And finally, we also observe a lot of geopolitical tensions, especially with Russia and China over the exclusive economic zone. So, the first use case I'm going to talk about is grazing cattle monitoring. This is a popular service in Japan now, and this service is provided by our partner, our channel, GI Supply. GI Supply is one of the pioneers in LoRaWAN adoption in Japan. They were one of the first companies to integrate LoRaWAN sensors and gateways and to promote LoRaWAN-based solutions on the Japanese market. They started introducing this service to agricultural corporations, cooperatives, as well as dairy farmers. And the needs of those entities were to be able to locate the cows easily, to detect if they escape or if they approach dangerous locations like swamps, cliffs, these kind of places. And the aging, and to help, in general, the aging population of farmers and dairy farmers. So to do that, they deployed sensors, LoRaWAN trackers, on the neck of the cows. And they are, thanks to that, the dairy farmers and the agricultural corporations can monitor the behavior of the cows. So the benefits are that the farmers don't need anymore to patrol several kilometers a day, and it also increases the overall productivity of the cattle monitoring business, because you increase the cow's birth rate by monitoring it, and you also reduce the overall cattle mortality, especially after birth. And LoRaWAN was the best technological match here, because the long-range capabilities were allowing GA Supply to place the gateway powered by a solar panel at the edge of the cellular network in remote areas. And the low power consumption, of course, is important too, for having sensors, battery that last a long time. And finally, as you can imagine, dairy farmers don't have a big budget to invest in this kind of solution. So the solution needed to be cost effective. And this is why LoRaWAN was a really good match here. The next one that our partner GA Supply is also covering is water quality monitoring for aquaculture. So this one is a really interesting one because it is driven by environmental factors and geopolitical factors. As you know, Japan is one of the main markets for fish consumption and is one of the main exporters of fish worldwide. And until 20, 30 years ago, the fish catches at sea were able to sustain that demand. But over the recent years, this is not the case anymore for two reasons. The impact of global warming on seawater temperatures, which makes the fishes migrate somewhere else. And finally, the territorial dispute over the exclusive economic zone with Russia, in particular over salmon and trout, for example. So now Japan needs some plant, some fish catches and production that is stable. And this is why aquaculture is on the rise, especially land-based aquaculture, because it does not require fishing permits and any other kind of permits. So to be able to monitor your aquaculture ponds' water quality is absolutely essential here, because it directly impacts the productivity. And this is why water quality sensing is essential here. So the end customer in that case are aquaculture companies or fishery cooperatives, and the GSOpply, by placing water probes in the ponds connected to a LoRaWAN RTU and placing one of our gateways close to the aquaculture ponds, enables them to monitor the pH, temperature, dissolved oxygen, or salinity, for example. And LoRaWAN is very relevant here because many of the suitable locations for land-based aquaculture are not well covered by LTE most of the time, because it could be in remote areas or caves, for example, because caves allows the temperature to be stable all year long. So this is an important factor as well. The next one we have is health monitoring, especially heat stroke prevention. So construction workers working in hot and humid environments are really prone to heat stroke, especially in Japan in summer. So since the construction workers are aging, heat stroke has become a really serious problem in Japan over the recent years. And they need to eliminate the risk of heat stroke using LoRaWAN. So how do they do this? Well, they place a sensor on site that measures weather information, and they place LoRaWAN trackers like smartwatches on the workers. Those watches are taking the heartbeat information, location information, as well as some motion sensing in order to detect falls. So if a worker or an employee falls, we can detect that he had a heat stroke and we can generate an alert. So this service is becoming very popular right now in Japan because LoRaWAN was a good match because it allowed to cover large construction areas. Also, it's very useful, again, for areas where LTE coverage is scarce. And this happens more often than we think, because in Japan you have lots of constructions in remote islands. And finally, the low energy consumption was also an important factor in the choice of the technology here. Next, we have agricultural IoT and wildlife monitoring. So here I take the example of Ina City in Nagano Prefecture. So the LoRaWAN gateways and the sensors are provided by our partner, Shinko Shoji, to the end customer, which is a local network operator called Ina iNet. And the IoT platform and the dashboard is provided by Genek Communication. So the problem faced by the local city of Ina and the local community is that they have an aging population of farmers and vermin controllers, and they need to find new ways to optimize the patrols to monitor the wild animals in order to protect the local agriculture. So their needs is basically measuring the temperature during the seedling cultivation and also the water level control in rice paddies. And at the same time, they have to prevent damages by wild animals. And for that, they use LoRaWAN connected traps and alerting features. So thanks to this deployment, they were able to optimize the rice crop growth, and they were able to reduce the patrols that the aging farmers had to do. So LoRaWAN was really a good match again here, because Ina iNet wanted to deploy a private network. They wanted to deploy it themselves. They wanted to manage it by themselves. So LoRaWAN enables that, and Ina City is surrounded by forests, mountains. So LTE coverage, again, is sometimes scarce in those areas. So they needed also the long-range communication capabilities of LoRaWAN. Next, in Japan, we also have, of course, some smart building applications. Here, I give an example that is covered by another of our partners for toilet occupancy monitoring. So originally, this use case is for reducing or optimizing the building management security and cleaning man hours. The implementation is actually quite simple here. You just placed a few of sensors on the door sensors in the toilets, plus a few emergency call buttons if you need to. You place one Kerlink gateway every 2 or 3 floors to cover the entire building. And thanks to that, you can reduce your labor needs, your operating costs, and optimize the number of cleaning and security man-hours overall. So why LoRaWAN here? It's because the coverage of the entire building could be done at a reasonable cost. So again, the cost-effective aspect of LoRaWAN was a really good point here. This same partner is also, as I mentioned, Japan is a country of factories. So this same partner has been working with factories on predictive maintenance use cases. Here I take the example of a Japanese steel manufacturer that need to monitor the status of its different manufacturing equipment to improve their uptime. So by deploying sensors on the equipment and monitoring it through LoRaWAN, they were able to do inspection at the appropriate time. They were also able to detect early malfunctions. And finally, they were able to reduce their operating and maintenance costs in general. So here, LoRaWAN is a really good match. Again, for 3 reasons. The ecosystem provides a wide range of already certified and ready-to-use sensors. And the second aspect is the most important, probably, it's security. Again, when you deal with Japanese factories, they will almost always build a completely closed and local private network that they will manage themselves. So being able to build their private network was an essential aspect for this use case. And finally, long-range capabilities are also very much appreciated because some of the manufacturing sites in Japan are extremely big and you need to be able to cover both indoor and outdoor areas. And finally, this same partner is also dealing with logistics company. Remember, I mentioned that Japan was a very logistics-intensive country. So here we are talking about warehouse monitoring. And logistics companies need to guarantee the quality of the goods like food, cosmetics, and so on, despite the heavy fluctuations in temperature and humidity all around the year. So to do that, monitoring the temperature within the warehouse is absolutely necessary. And the implementation can be done quite easily with LoRaWAN by deploying one indoor gateway, for example, covering the entire warehouse, and sensors in key locations in the warehouse. So the customer was really happy about LoRaWAN because it can cover the entire facility, and again, it is cost-effective to monitor temperature and humidity in the warehouse. So this is a popular service in Japan now, and it is only growing because, as you can guess, with the big manufacturing economy and the big e-commerce market, you have lots of warehouses to manage here. And finally, this one is extremely exciting. This is condition-based maintenance for railways. So this is one of our, I would say, best success stories in Japan at the moment for Kerlink, but also for the LoRaWAN ecosystem as a whole. Basically, we deployed hundreds of Kerlink outdoor gateways along the railroads and thousands of LoRaWAN sensors. And this is one of the biggest LoRaWAN deployments in Japan right now. The objectives are to monitor the facilities along the railroad tracks. So it can be signaling equipment like traffic lights, it can be the overhead electrical lines temperature, it can be the railroad crossing equipment status, or it can be rockfall detection in mountainous areas, for example. So why did this customer choose LoRaWAN? Well, they wanted to enable remote inspection and be able to perform a more detailed daily management of their railroad facilities. And they wanted to reduce the risk of industrial accidents. Because yes, if you send employees to do the maintenance, there is a risk of electrical shock, fall, or being hit by a train. It also reduces the huge labor shortages impact that Japan is facing right now, and especially on this kind of companies working for the railways. And it also reduces the maintenance costs, of course. They selected LoRaWAN for many reasons. One of the most important is, again, security. They wanted to build their private network and manage it by themselves. This was a very important component of their selection here. And They also needed long-range communication capabilities and a cost-effective infrastructure. Yes, when you're about to deploy one gateway every kilometer of railway, yeah, you better hope that your infrastructure is cost-effective. They also needed to collect wide variety of data, so the LoRaWAN protocol is quite adapted for that. And finally, they needed sensors with low power consumption. Oh, and I forgot to mention, actually, that this is the first large-scale installation of such a system in the railroad industry in Japan. And finally, the final use case I'm going to talk about today is facilities management. So Eon Delight is one of Japan's leading facility management provider. They also have a strong presence in Asia. And they worked in conjunction with Semtech, Genek Communication, Kerlink, and Ricoh to deploy a LoRaWAN network in more than 90 commercial facilities in Japan. And for this project, Ricoh developed specifically a brand new indoor sensor powered by solar cells that can measure temperature, humidity, and CO2 level. And the sensor can power itself just using ambient light, even with the light we have over there. And Genek Communication was providing the LoRaWAN core network infrastructure, relying on AWS in the IoT Core for LoRaWAN, and as well as their IoT platform called IoT Station. So the benefits is that they could reduce the labor needs and the operating costs to monitor temperature, humidity, and CO2 levels in the commercial facilities, as well as improving the shopper experience, because if the CO2 level is too high, the customer will be tired, he will leave the premises very quickly. And finally, I am taking a bit too much time, I guess. What's next for LoRaWAN in Japan? Well, what we can expect from Kerlink's perspective, at least, we expect more initiatives from the government and from the local administrations to respond to landslides and floods using IoT. They are already starting to discuss with IoT service provider. We also, with the labor workforce shortage and the aging population, we also expect that a lot of IoT will be deployed in retirement homes to help the local staff to perform their daily tasks. This could be a very big market for LoRaWAN. And finally, we also foresee a big potential in restaurant chains. Japan, contrarily to the European market, I believe, has a lot of big restaurant chains covering the entire country. And those restaurant chains already started discussing with IoT service providers for the usual HACCP compliance across restaurants, as well as cold chain monitoring, temperature, humidity, CO2 monitoring in the restaurants or in the fridges, for example. And finally, we also expect more factories, smart factories, warehouse monitoring, and smart maintenance projects in the near future. Thank you very much.